This weekend saw Nice fans protest against the ownership of their club by INEOS, by Sir Jim Ratcliffe. What happened? What's gone on? Why are they protesting? What does that mean for Manchester United fans and the concept of a potential takeover of our club by Jim Ratcliffe and INEOS? What I'm going to do in this video is try my best to explain what happened. We'll take a look at their results this season, the football, but also hear from Dante, the club's captain, which I think is quite an important part to take into account of all of this. Because as I always have done throughout this entire process, I've tried to remain balanced in looking at any Qatari takeover of Manchester United or any INEOS and Sir Jim Ratcliffe takeover of Manchester United. Both have pros, both have cons. Now, I want to run through the ownership of Nice. Again, I've done this twice and I'm going to do it again because you can't ignore what's gone on at the weekend. If the fans are protesting, they are doing it for a reason. What is that reason? I'm going to try and explain it in this video, so make sure you do follow for the next 10 minutes. Give me some time and let me explain what's gone on. Now, first and foremost, you know well, maybe you don't. Nice are mid-table right now in Ligue 1. They're in 9th position. They're not going to get Champions League football next year. They're not going to get, I don't think, any football next year. They're, 9 points off, and I think there's 2 games left to play. And their recent run of results has not been good. Since they got knocked out of the Europa League against Basel when they were at home, they lost to Clermont-Foot. Who else they lost? Lost to Strasbourg. They drew against Toulouse there. And it's been a massively mixed bag, to the point where it's being dubbed as a bit of a crisis. Now, this is written by Luke Entwistle, who I spoke with from GFFN, their senior editor. He covered this at the weekend. So I'm going to run through his article and see what he's saying. But he's labelling it as a crisis at Nice. Nice fans made their discontent felt on Sunday. The club's 2 major ultra groups announced prior to Sunday's match against Toulouse that they would be on strike during the game. The Populaire Sud, known for their fervent and often fiery support, were the first to announce their strike, and the North side joined the movement on Saturday. If you don't want to play, why support you? And we go over here and we see this is the statement that was released there. We insist no singing on the match. This is the ultra group, and that's the second ultra group. And a little bit of digging and a little bit of research. We find this is not the first, certainly not in the first game in a row. They haven't been there. So look, this is a separate article, a separate French article written about we can scroll up here, look, right? You see what it's called. The Red and Black Minute. Don't know what that translation is for. What's the attitude of the Nice fans for this upcoming game against Toulouse? And we know what happened here. This was prior to the protest. Let me zoom out a little bit there. Oh my God, thank you very much. We first had an empty stadium against Clermont, and we can go over here and we can see the empty seats. And we can go here and say that it was half empty against Rennes, and we can go here and we can see those empty seats. And it continued, and I found this quite interesting. Suspended, the Nice Ultras were suspended from the stands for the last 2 games after a banner and insulting chants against Christophe Galtier, who, of course, left Nice to become PSG's manager, and is currently PSG's manager. And PSG, of course, was the club that Jim Ratcliffe and INEOS vowed to compete against when they took over in 2019. And now, unfortunately for Nice, where they currently sit, well, PSG are about to win the title. And Nice are just shy of 30 points behind them in the league. And they currently have the manager that they took from Nice. So you can understand where the frustration comes from the fans. Now, the Nice fans and the Nice Ultras, it's not the first time that they've protested and boycotted. They did it 3 months prior to to INEOS taking over Nice. Now, the thing that I find, I suppose, interesting is the wrong word to describe it. But Dante, the club captain, spoke about everything that happened here after the game and has spoken out about where the frustrations are coming from. And I think this is probably where we get a little bit more insight, because the fans are protesting. They're not happy with the results. They're not happy where their club lies. But what do the club management think? What do the club players think? And what's the issue going on behind the scenes? I tell you what, it feels like there's some communication problems. Certainly. This is what Dante said after. He said, I think at some point you have to be clear in what you're saying. To maintain a project, maybe you need to speak less about objectives and work in silence to create an environment of competitors. because the expectation is even bigger. And then after, people are frustrated. The best thing to do is to prepare as quickly as possible for next season in order to start it well. Do you remember how many players came in at the end of the transfer window last summer? 6 left, 6 arrived. It's difficult in these conditions. Simply, we mustn't make the same errors. If somebody wants my opinion, the earlier we organise ourselves, the better it will be. If we want to aim higher, we have to anticipate things and put the values of the organisation in place. When the coach, Lucien Favre, arrived, we said in 2 years that we would always be in the Champions League. It doesn't always work like that. League One is very difficult. We lost 10 players and 10 arrived. Teams in the semi-finals of big competitions played together for 3-4 years. We changed everything last summer. There's a lack of coherence somewhere. I'm sorry to say that. To be more concrete, how many players have been consistent this season? The response is simple. A competitive team has 12, 13, 14 players at this top level. So Dante, and the reason I'm saying it's interesting to hear a club captain speaking out there, he is speaking out against the ownership. He's speaking out against the structure of the club. Now, you remember I had that conversation with Luke Entwistle, and this is what he said when I asked him about the actual structure behind the scenes of it, Nice under INEOS.
So it's been 2019. So it's taken them 3-4 years to really have this reshuffle.
Yeah. So you would probably say that going into this summer, that the structure behind the scenes at Nice is the strongest it's been since INEOS took over.
Yeah, undoubtedly. Yeah, it's the strongest it's been since they took over. I think that this is the first football club along with Lausanne that they've really owned. Maybe it's a learning curve, and maybe from that they'll learn that it's important to have their men in from the start and start to reconstruct things rather than kind of go for a laissez-faire kind of just let things stay as they were when we arrived kind of approach, which is kind of the approach that was used when they arrived at Nice, and maybe they'll learn from that. But yeah.
Well, again, as I said, because I'm covering every single aspect of this and I'm trying to be as balanced as possible, according to Luke Entwistle, from this summer onwards, it's going to be better. I suppose the point he's trying to make there is that this is as low as it's going to get. But this is 3-4 years into the ownership now. And I think it's interesting when you take a little bit of a look back here, because this is the original statement that was released from Jim Ratcliffe and from INEOS back in August 2019 when they took over the club. And we run through what was said here, right? Because these are the words when statements are made like these are the words that owners get held to. Did you fulfill on the promises that you gave us 3-4 years ago? Well, let's take a quick look back at what Jim Ratcliffe and INEOS said. He said, we have looked at a lot of clubs in the manner we look at businesses in INEOS for value and potential, and Nice fulfills that criteria with some sensible measured investment. We want to establish Nice as a team that competes in European clubs competitions on a regular basis and importantly sustains it. We are delighted about acquiring Nice. It has been quite a long journey getting here, unique, determined to blah, 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 blah. Nice has a great history and tradition with a passionate fan base who will play an important role in our journey. The Allianz Riviera Stadium is superb, blah, 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 blah. We made some mistakes at Lausanne, but we are fast learners. These have been rectified and we are already seeing the benefits. Clubs need to be successful off the pitch as well as on it. And Nice will be no different as we look to take the club from strength to strength in all aspects over the coming years. Now, you might not be able to see that. It's a little bit too zoomed out. But that doesn't reflect well on INEOS and Jim Ratcliffe. That statement there. We made some mistakes at Lausanne. Because what's happened here is they've made some quite major mistakes at Nice over the 4 years that we're to the point now where if we take a look at the league table, where Nice are nearly 30 points off PSG. To the point here where fans are protesting against the club again. Empty stadiums, not because of they were banned. But they're releasing statements. They're confirming boycotts. There's a bad feeling, and the fact that Dante, the club captain, is speaking out against these issues, you can't just ignore it, right? Even if you're completely against the Qatari takeover, you can't just ignore it. Right? And that's what I've tried my hardest to do. And I tell you what, I'm exhausted from trying to do that now. The amount of bullshit I get thrown at me, it's getting on my nerves. Really is, as to who the best new owner could be. I don't have an answer to that. I'm telling you, there's not a perfect owner. I've been telling you that for quite some time. But INEOS and their failure so far at Nice doesn't mean they can't turn it around. No, they could. But the fact that all these mistakes were made after Jim Ratcliffe there, going back to the 2019 statement about saying that we made some mistakes at Lausanne and we learned from it. I wouldn't say that taking 4 years to get Nice, if Luke is correct, and they are in the strongest position to move forward, it's taken them 4 years to get to that point. It's taken them to the point where their manager that left them mid-season is now at PSG and taking them to another title whilst Nice sit 30 points behind. I can understand why there are protests, why there's anger among the fans. But all of this needs to be taken into account when we look at the potential new ownership of Manchester United. I don't know enough about Sheikh Jassim to be able to scrutinise to this sort of extent. But because Jim Ratcliffe and INEOS own Nice, there's a direct comparison, which is why I'm doing this video. Please let me know what you think in the comments below. I can't wait for this takeover to actually have somebody we can scrutinise, truly, focus, a decision from the Glazers. Please. But I think this needs to be taken into account, and I'll be interested to know where you all stand on it.